everybody. Welcome back to part 2 with Nick Robinson from E2 360. In part 1, we talked about vMix, discussing what vMix is. Nick walked us through the interface, talking about how you can use it for live streaming productions. Today, we're going to go into a little bit of a deeper dive into vMix. Nick's going to go through some of the features, such as live streaming, getting out, talking about callers and audio, and some other particular of the feature set of vMix, because there is a lot to it, even what Nick covered in part 1. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Glad to have you with us. If this video is helpful, hit the like button. It lets us know that it was helpful for you, and share your comments. If you're returning to the channel, please go ahead and hit the like button, ring that bell to get notified when I post videos. And I also want to say thank you to those that are new subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. It really does help the channel to grow. And when you share those comments and hit that like button, it really helps in the YouTube world. And I do post these videos on Facebook. So that's another area of the platform of those out there that I do post the videos to. And so, you can certainly welcome to visit the Facebook page, and I'll put a link into the description from today's session. So we're going to jump over and talk with Nick. It's, again, a little bit later his time. He's in London, but really appreciate his time. So let's go ahead and jump over there. Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Awesome. Thank you for having me again. Yeah, doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I've got my coffee here. I'm gonna sit and have you go walk through it, and I'm excited to kind of jump into the additional features. I know in part 1, you kind of covered the setup and building a show or an event, and now we're going to kind of jump into maybe some specific features. One of them being maybe the live streaming, how to get it out to a destination.
Okay, sure, yeah. So obviously in part 1, we went into sort of the basics. So I, as you know, I sort of work in corporate events. So I sort of base this show around basic corporate events. So what we covered was some very basic of how to bring in some input. So we brought in a video, as we can see on the left over here. We brought in a logo, so my company logo. We brought in a nice sort of corporate-y looking background that we'd use for, a conference or maybe an award show, something like that. We brought in a USB camera, which is just a webcam that I've got over at the side of me, which represents maybe a camera in a room or, sort of a presenter camera, something like that. We've brought in our PowerPoint presentation, which is brought in over a little Dell desktop machine that I've got for my presentations, and then we brought in that over a protocol called NDI. So there's 2 ways to bring in presentations within vMix, as we went over in part 1. There's bringing it through a capture card, which is basically a device that allows you to input a HDMI source into your computer. So for instance, a lot of gaming channels on YouTube will use them to plug in their Xbox, PS5, whatever. And then we've brought in that over NDI. So instead of using a capture card, which might be USB or it might be integrated into the actual computer, it basically takes a screen grab of your computer screen, and then it'll pick it up on the network within the computer. So for instance, vMix. So we've brought in our PowerPoint presentation. And then also what we covered was how to create a speaker layout. So for instance, on a corporate show, you might have a single camera on screen with a background behind it, a logo, and then we might have a scene with our presentation, our speaker on the left or the right-hand side, however you want to move things around, and then a bit of branding. It might be a logo, hashtag, or we've got my logo in this case. So obviously, an important part of streaming is the actual streaming part. So at the bottom of vMix, you've got your add input, which is obviously how to add inputs. You've got your record, which is to create a MP4 recording, and that will create a recording of what's going out to your stream. And then we've also got the stream button. So for instance, for this purpose, we're going to stream out to YouTube and Facebook. So, or it might be another platform like Hopin, or we might be going out to Vimeo to sort of embed that within a custom website if a client wants it. Or we might be going out to another platform, for instance. So if we click the little cog icon next to stream, and then you can see here you've got numbers 1, 2, and 3. So what vMix allows you to do is stream out to 3 different destinations. So for instance, I might have an event and my client wants to stream out to YouTube and Facebook at the same time. So to set up a stream, YouTube and Facebook or your chosen platform will provide you with a stream key or an URL, and basically you just need to input those within vMix. So you've got a drop-down list for a destination. So your destination is obviously where you're sending it to. So Facebook and YouTube in our case. So vMix already creates some presets for a lot of different services. So for instance, we're going to stream out to YouTube in this case. So you can log into your YouTube channel and then add the stream key, which YouTube provides for you. And then also what you want to do is set the quality of the stream. So you've got different options here. vMix is good in the way that it already gives you some presets. So you might want to stream at 720, 1080, or it may be a platform that requires a lower resolution. So do check with the platform. Most platforms will give you an ideal sort of resolution and then the bit rate. And then you can also set a custom bitrate and custom sort of resolution if required.
I was just going to ask that. I was just going to ask about that. Can you set a custom output in terms of the destination piece?
Yeah, so as I just did there, it's just if you would need to do it for some reason, if the platform requires you to go, for instance, Vimeo likes you to stream at a certain bitrate and a certain resolution and sort of stream size, and the audio settings need to be a certain bitrate. So you can just come into the cog here and then set up all of your settings. But for the most part, the platforms are pretty good. And then we just select YouTube, for instance, or Facebook or Vimeo, whatever, and then set our resolution, add our stream key, and then we just click save and close. So if we wanted to add 2 or 3 streams, we'd also just go into the number 2 and number 3, and then also set, for instance, Facebook in here. And then once we've done that, we hit save and close. And then when we're ready to stream, simply hit the stream button. It'll turn red. And then we're streaming out to our platform. Something to note with a lot of platforms is when you hit stream, there'll be a 20-second delay usually. It might be 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or 20 seconds. So do bear that in mind when you are streaming. So for instance, if I make the transition from this current state with me on screen and the presentation to just the background, there'll be a 20-second delay between you making an action within vMix and it coming up for the viewers on the platform. So it's just something to be aware if you're doing a time-sensitive stream. So, for instance, if I'm going to start my stream at 8 p.m, I want to start it around 20 seconds to 8, and then we'll be on time, give or take. So it's just some sort of consideration. So that's really how to stream. And then likewise, if you wanted to create a recording of your stream, again, just come down to the record, similar sort of thing, press the cog, and then you can record at different formats. So you've got AVI, MP4, WMV, AVI. It depends what you're sort of wanting, or you might have a video editing team or a media team or something like that. And then they want a certain format because they may be working in a certain bit of software or a certain codec or something like that. And then that's just a consideration to have. So similar to the stream, you can set the resolution, frame rate, bit rate, and then where the audio is coming from. So as I mentioned yesterday, you've got various bus outputs. So obviously the master goes out to the stream, and then the bus out's your independent routing. So for instance, like I said yesterday, I might have a speaker in the room so people can hear playback of what's going on in the stream, or we might just want to record an individual feed. So we can choose to record a specific audio feed if we like, but it's usually the master for most streams. Also, you can select a output. So again, as I mentioned yesterday in the part 1, you've also got 4 separate video outputs. So we can assign different inputs to outputs basically. So if I just wanted to record, I don't know, my USB camera that's coming in at the side here, I could send that to output 2 as the input, and then send output 2 to my recording, and then that'll take the feed from just the webcam. But for our instance, we're just going to record the master feed and then the main program output, which is what's going out to the platform. So we'll just select output 1, and then you can set the destination of where you want it to record to. And it's all pretty much straightforward. Again, when you're ready to hit record, you just literally press the record button. It'll sometimes ask you to confirm your settings, and then hit the record button, and then you'll be good to go. So that's just how to. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, it's okay. No, it's fine. Can you? So I think you could hit on a couple topics there. So one, you could when you're doing that archiving, or what you're talking about is the archiving, recording of the content. Are you able to take that and record? You can record the audio files or capture separately from the video, in addition to the master. So if you wanted to capture the audio track, so in case in post-production efforts you needed to go back and actually, like, maybe realign, maybe there was in the initial capture there was a problem with audio, right? And you want to get the speaker, like you said, the speaker's presentation, and make sure the audio was clean.
Yeah, so if you're wanting to do something like that, for instance, where you've got a media team and then they want a slide sync, and then they want the presenter camera separately, and they want to be able to read, chop and edit it, as most companies I work with do, then you've also got the MultiCorder option down here, which is basically the same as Recorder, but allows you to do 4 separate record feeds. So a bit similar to the single recording. You can set the format, set the audio input, and then you can select, I believe it's up to 4 separate record feeds. One thing I would note with vMix is do check which license you've got, as different licenses have different features. So for instance, the Pro license that I've got allows you to do 8 remote callers. And then you've also got the MultiCorder option, which is how to record different, what we call ISOs of different sources. And then as you'll see here, you can just select 4 different inputs. So for instance, I want to record my USB camera as a one file. We'll want to record my presentation, and I also want output 1 and 2. So that will create 4 separate recordings of your content, basically, so your editors can re-chop and edit things up post stream, and then again just hit the MultiCorder button, and that'll start the stream.
That sounds perfect. And so that, and obviously when you are recording and using some of those features, and we're talking in terms of the archive, you're capturing. Obviously, another aspect of we talked about the configuration yesterday. You kind of went over the config settings, and we kind of went over that in terms of the setup, and we'll provide some information for folks. But one of the other areas is making sure you have enough disk capacity, whether it's on the system.
Sure.
Can you record to an external drive and capture those MPEG-4 files, right, as an example?
Yeah, sure. So obviously something to consider with vMix is hardware. So obviously disk space being one. So obviously if you're recording at 1080p 4 times over, and it's maybe, I don't know, a 4-hour conference, then obviously that's going to take up quite a lot of space. So for instance, around 4 hours of recording at HD would be roughly between 5 and 10 gig. Depending on the quality of the feed that you're sending over, and whether there's any compression involved. So obviously disk space is something to consider. In my machine, I've got around 1.5 terabytes of space, and then after every sort of event I do, I'll hand that over to the client, make a backup of it, and then I'll clear off the machine. So a good practice is generally once you've finished with a stream, back it up to the cloud or back it up to an external drive and then get rid of it off your system. And then what you won't find is after, 10 or 20 events, your system's not clogged up and your hard drives aren't full. Right. And then also something to consider, which I believe we spoke offline about, is hardware. So do check on the vMix website the recommended hardware specs, because obviously the more inputs that you add within vMix, the more processing it requires. So do check. vMix are very hot on it, and they do have a good support email where if you're unsure of anything, you can just send them an email, say, this is the setup that I've got, or what would you recommend? This is what I want to do. And then they'll be able to recommend you a certain system spec. So for instance, a certain NVIDIA card that will have enough processing power for what you required. Because obviously video uses more GPU graphic power than it does CPU. So do check on the vMix website. There is a reference systems page. So it's just something to consider when you are purchasing the hardware, or whether you're considering using existing hardware that you may have in your workplace or church or exhibition centre, something like that. So, but yeah, vMix are generally pretty good with support, and yeah, just send them over an email and they're good at getting back to you.
That's fantastic. No, I think, and we'll put for everybody watching the session in part 2 here. Nick and I did talk about that offline. We'll put a link to that reference page and provide you a link to get back to it. So Nick is absolutely right. So make sure you check out those specifications that they put there, and appreciate it. Okay, Nick, let's keep going.
Awesome. So, for instance, what we've done, we've covered a camera in the room. So this camera that I've got on screen right now. So obviously in today's world, everyone's sort of distributed. They might be in different countries, or they might be in the same town. But obviously with what's going on at the moment, it's mostly people joining from home, or, their workplace that's from the location that you control in the stream from. So vMix has a handy function called vMix Call. So as I mentioned before, you're able to bring in 8 callers within the Pro license. Then I believe you're able to bring in 4 with the 4K license, which is slightly below the Pro license. So obviously at the moment, a lot of people are using Zoom and Teams, but I suppose the issue with Zoom and Teams is it doesn't give you a split feed. So you can bring in Zoom and Teams, no problem. But it'll give you the multi-view as it shows on screen. But that's not great for like a corporate presentation. We want to make it look a bit more, graphically pleasing. And a bit more professional. So for that, we're going to use vMix Call. So again, as we bring in any other input, we're going to add input. And then at the bottom, you've got video call. So as I mentioned, you can bring up to 8 callers. So that's the limit that you're capped at. And then we'd need to consider putting a second system in, or, multiple systems, depending on the requirements of the particular job. So as I mentioned, click add inputs, come down to the bottom, press video call. And then what you want to do is it'll give you a link, which you send to the caller. That's how they log in. And then it will also give them a password. And then you can also set the bitrate and resolution that each caller comes in. So the nice thing about vMix is you can bring different resolution of callers in. So for instance, if your internet's not great, or you've got people out in the countryside and their signal strength is not great from their ISP, what you can do is drop the resolution down and the bitrate, and then that will help with some bandwidth management to ensure you have a nice stream. So you can also set audio source. So we can, for instance, a speaker may just want to see a feed of the presentation, so they can see which slide they're on. So we can set our presentation as output 2, and then send output 2 to that caller. So we can set, it's very custom. We can send different feeds to different callers who we like. So for instance, we might have a producer on call 8. which wants to see all 8 callers, sorry, all 7 callers, should I say. And then the actual presenters might just want to see the presentation. So we've got 3 extra outputs other than the master to send out to. Great. So once we've set that, we go to click OK. And then you'll see here we've brought in a caller. So what you want to do to give the caller the specific link, what we want to do is right click and then come into our call manager. So if you click open call manager, and then this will give you a link, a sort of overview of who's connected and the links for each call. So for instance, you can see here 9054 is this link here. So all we do is send that to our presenter. And then once they log in, I unfortunately haven't got a screen grab of it, but I'm sure we can put one on screen for you. It's a bit similar to Zoom. You'd put your name in it and then the passcode, and then click OK, set your webcam and the microphone, and then the callers are in. So just to speed things up, I've already joined as a caller here. So I've got a MacBook Pro that's at the side of me here. And then like the other sources, it just comes in as widescreen. And then also in the audio mixer, you can see that I've got a audio feed, and the second caller that I'd literally just set up has got its own call feed. So as I mentioned, the I suppose another nice feature of this is you get a separate feed for each individual caller. Rather than sort of Zoom and Teams or, I don't know, Blue Jeans or another similar call service that most companies are using, it's a mixed feed, so it's not very ideal. So what we might find is if someone's live on screen and then another presenter joins in, and then there's some, I don't know, a dog barking in the background or the doorbell going or something like that, which it always happens, then that's going to come out on your feed. So we've got it mitigates some risk, and then gives you a lot better management in terms of how your callers are sort of managed, and sort of creating, I suppose, a professional output, which is similar to a sort of TV output to your viewers. So how do we manage caller audio, and so me as the operator who's going to be operating vMix, how do I talk to them before they go live? So I've got a normal $50 Razer headset that you can just buy off Amazon, or any sort of USB headset will work. So what we need to do is add a input, and then we want to add a audio input this time. So as we can see, we've got a Razer headset, and then we add that in. So as you can see here, my headset has just come through. So if I just click the cog, and then I'm going to rename that to my headset. Great, so that's brought that in as an audio feed. So we don't want my headset going out to the stream, as you'll see here. So on the master, you'll see the meter reading. So we want to take that out of the master. So as you'll see now, that's not sending anywhere. You'll see here it is activated, but it's not sending anywhere because we've not sent it to a feed. So that's where the bus outputs really come into their own. So obviously we want any video content, presentation content, incoming callers going out to the master, but we don't want my feed going out. So we've taken me out of master, and then what we're going to do is send me to bus A. So bus A is a separate bus, which we're going to send to our callers. So what we need to do now is also send bus A to our caller. So if we right click and then come to audio source, what we can do is send, you can see here, I can send the master, I can send my headphones or bus A, B and C to our callers, or you might have, I believe it's 8 buses that vMix gives you. But just for this purpose, I'm going to send my headset bus A. So now we've right clicked, and now we can see bus A is sending, and then my headset is going out. And then my headset, as you can see, is not going out to the stream. So that's really a good way for me to talk to the presenter and perhaps prepare them before they go to live. So for instance, a lot of time I'll give my presenters a count to 10, count from 10 to 0, and then we'll go, when you see yourself on screen, now you're live. And then it creates a nice professional looking and sounding output, and then you don't come out on the stream. So that's how we manage that. So also, as I mentioned, what we can do is also send a video source in the same way. So I can send, one is our output that's going out to the stream, or we can send 2, 3, and 4. So just to remind you how to change the output to send to callers or send to the output, if we just press the settings, go to video outputs, if I can find it, outputs. And then as you can see here, we can assign an output. So for instance, we want to send my presentation, which is input 5, through to our caller, which is on output 2. So we've gone to our settings, outputs and NDI, and then we're going to send output 5, which is our presentation. If we click OK, and then now we can see, there we go. So now the speaker is seeing the presentation. So that's a good way to send different things to callers. And that's really an overview of how to manage callers.
Now, when you do that, Nick, when you talk about and doing that on the caller side of it, are they just seeing through a web browser in terms of what they see, what you're sending them from, in terms of the MultiView type, what feed you're presenting to them?
Yeah, sure. So the presenter's joined by Chrome browser. Generally, Google Chrome is recommended. I can send you a screenshot of the joining page, and I'm sure we can just fly that on screen. And then basically all they need to do is enter the call details, and then on the screen, they'll see a representation of what's coming through. So, for instance, now they're seeing the presentation. It will come up full screen on their web browser.
That's cool.
So we can either send the program of what's going out to stream, or we can build a custom multi-view and maybe send presenters with a countdown timer, any sort of multi-view. We could create a custom view, for instance, like we did yesterday, where we've got a multi-view of our sources. This could be multiple callers, and we can send that out. So it's very sort of modular vMix in the way that you can build it and sort of build it to whatever you need it to be. And like I say, it just comes up on the web browser, and they can just see it in front of them on their screen. So it's very sort of similar to Zoom. It's just that it's just 8 feeds instead of, or should I say, individual feeds rather than, I suppose, like a built multi-view. So with vMix, you have to sort of build it rather than it's ready-made, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But vMix Call is definitely, as I say, it's much better in the way that it gives you individual audio feeds, so it's a lot better to manage. And then also each individual caller comes in as a separate feed. And also Teams has just brought in a new feature with NDI, so you can now bring in individual video feeds from Teams, similar to vMix Call. I'd say the only downfall is that you've got it's one mix of the audio rather than separate feeds, so a little bit better from Zoom in the way that it doesn't force you to bring in a sort of multi-view ready-made. And it'll give you sort of singularity in the way that the callers come in, but the audio is mixed in the cloud, so it's just something to consider. So I suppose vMix gives you the best of both, where you've got individual videos, individual audio feeds. And then something to also mention is on the audio mixer here, you've got these little 2 arrows, so you'll see the little green and orange arrow, which is like an auto follow. So for instance, if you can see it now, it's not live, and then when I bring it live, it'll then bring in your, you can see here it's now toggled the audio for me, and then when I bring that out, it'll then turn it off. So that's a good way to automatically manage the audio, just so you can take some steps out of what you're doing. which is always nice. But for instance, you might want to show a presentation on screen, full screen, but you want the person's audio behind. So obviously with the auto follow on, it will untoggle their audio if you bring them off screen. So what we can do is take the auto toggle off and just enable the audio. And then that's a good way to have sort of presentation, with speaker behind.
No, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, that's kind of very helpful. And I think you're kind of jumping into area in terms of productions when we're dealing with something where you just have, where people will see a presentation. I think it's one of the neat features of vMix, right, is that we're able to take behind the scenes and kind of manage that process and be able to handle and cut the audio when we transition. So that way, if by chance the speaker is still talking behind the scenes, it's not coming through the main audio feed out to everybody on the internet. And so, which can make things rather difficult and having that done. So, no, I think that's a terrific area in terms of being able to manage that process. That's fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that you also might want to do, so for instance, on a corporate presentation, you might want to, when you first introduce in a speaker and they first come on screen, you might want their name on screen. So vMix does have titling built in and text editors. So I'll just do a quick demonstration of that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a vMix GT title. So if we come down to the add input, and then we come down to title. So vMix is really good in the way that it gives you pre-formatted titles. So as you can see here, you've got titles, or lower thirds as they're called sometimes. You can bring in scoreboards if it's a sport event, or we can bring in timers. You've got animated titles. You can bring in logos, that kind of thing. We can also bring in Twitter, hashtags, that kind of stuff. So if you're doing an event that wants to bring in some tweets from, people watching the event and you want some live interaction, then we can do that. But for our instance, we're just going to create a title. So I'm just going to select this one. So if we click OK. Great. So as you'll see here, it's now added the title in, and then we can edit the text. So if I just come out of this, and then if we bring that to our program, as you can see, that's now come on screen. So obviously we don't want headline and description. We want our speaker name. So if I right click and go to title editor, you'll see here. So headline, so you'll see here, that's the main body, you've got the description, and then you can also add a logo. So something to note is you'll need a certain pixel size for the logo, so do resize your logo file to the recommended size. Say for instance, this is 140 by 140, so you could do that in Photoshop or some free editing software or whatever you like to use. So we are just going to add my name, so if we add Nick Robinson. Great, so we've added our speaker name, and then if we just add E2 which is my company. Awesome, so we've added a title now, and then I've not got a logo, but imagine that's a corporate logo, or it might be my company logo. So as you can see, that's a little bit big on screen. So what we want to do is resize that. So if we come up to the cog again, press position, and then we can resize it. And then obviously it's moved, and then what we want to do is just reset that. I always get the X and Y mixed up. So it's an easy one to do. It is. So yeah, we've sized that to a nice sort of size now. We're happy with that. It's all sort of formatted correctly. Great. So obviously if we just bring that to live, if we just bring my camera over, and then if we fade that in, it cuts across the top, which is obviously not what we want. So So let's say our speaker is live and then we want to bring our overlay in. So if you see at the bottom here, you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 over every input. So that is our overlay. So essentially what an overlay will do is it will overlay over the top of what's on the program at that particular time. So for instance, I might want to overlay my logo, or in this instance, the title. So if I just click the 1, it now nicely animates my name tag and my company name. And then once it's done, it will bring it off screen or automatically, or I can just click the number again and it will turn it off. So that's a nice way to bring in title overlays. But what if I wanted to bring in the title when I bring in my input? So for instance, we want to bring in this my camera, which is my USB webcam that's over here. And then we also want to bring in that title as an overlay. So vMix is very nice in the way that you can build it to be very custom. So what we're going to do for this instance is I want to, when I cut in my USB camera, is also bring in the title as well. So I'm going to go to the cog, and then we are going to go to triggers. So what triggers allow you to do is basically trigger different things off, for instance, an input. So for instance, when this input has cut in, I then want to overlay this title. So if I come to, again, the cog on that input, and then come down to triggers on the left-hand side, and then if we come to this drop-down, we've got on completion. So for instance, on completion is when a video's finished. So if I want something to happen when a video finishes, for instance, I'd do on completion, or on transition in is obviously when you've transitioned a source in. So in this instance, we're going to go transition in. And then we're also you can also select a function. So on this instance, we're going to go to overlay. So vMix is very vast in the way that you can do things. As you can see, there's hundreds of shortcuts for things that you can do. So for instance, you can autoplay things, you can start countdowns to go, you can set outputs from things. So you can get really technical with this, but I'd say when you first start, just stick with the basics. And then over time, when you spent 40, 50 hours on of this, and you've done, 20 shows, then start getting a bit more fancy with it. But for instance, for this one, we're going to come to overlay. So as you can see, there's like 20 or 25 different functions that you can overlay with. So what we want you've got 4 overlays. So we want to overlay our input 1 in. So that will basically overlay 1, and then it will bring it in. So that gives you an idea of and then it sort of really follows. So obviously you've got overlay input 2, overlay input 3, etc., etc. And then also what you want to do is select an input. So that will specifically tell the trigger where to point at. So as best practice, you always want to point that at the thing that you want to trigger. So in our instance, you can see our title is title 12. It's input 12 rather. So as you can see here, it shows on screen the input numbers and then also what it's called. And then if we click add, that's now added that in. And then also you can set a delay. So for instance, if I want to set that 1 second out, so it fades in, and then that trigger needs to wait 1 second, I'd add 1,000 milliseconds of delay to that, and then it'd basically play that overlay in 1 second out. So if I come out of that, hopefully that will work. There we go. And as we can see, we've now brought in the input, and then we've brought in the speaker title. So that's one thing I like to do with my events is try and automate things as much as possible, and it takes the human element out of it, and it makes things a little more efficient.
Absolutely.
And then, so that's a real sort of basic overview of how to bring in titles and sort of create some automation with things like titles, or I could automate a logo. But it's like I say, it's very modular, and you can make it sort of do whatever you want it to do, really. I think it's just spend some time with it. Just don't get too bogged down on the features. Just play for a while. You can't break anything. And then, just spend a few hours with it. How does the audio mixer work? How does the triggers work? And then, once you start getting into it, you can become a little more fancy, like create multi-views and, things like that. So that really gives you a good basis. So, and then one other thing I wanted to sort of do from I suppose a graphical standpoint. So what if I wanted to create some borders around my input? So I want to create me as a caller with another caller with a nice sort of overlay around it. So as we did yesterday, come into the cog on our background, we come to the MultiView, and then we want to add our, it will be USB camera. So if we bring that over there, and then bring that over to the left, and then our overlay 2, I want to bring that in as my color. So we can now create panel sessions of speakers, as you can see here, with multi-views, which is quite useful. So for instance, we could have myself and John on screen, as you can see on his overlays he's got on this YouTube video. And then we can really layer it up with graphics. So, and what I've also got here is I've got a 2-shot overlay. So we can make this look a little more graphically nicer. And then if we add our 2-shot overlay, we just scale that. And then if we just go back and scale our input to that size, I'm just going to be really rough with it just for time's sake. And then you've also got zoom, so you can make it, you can zoom it in. We also go with our overlay number 1, and then if we just bring that over like that, if we just zoom that out, and then what we've done there, we've just created a nice graphically looking 2-speaker panel, and then here I appear, or 2 speakers appear, and then you can really create some nice graphically looking overlays with this, and then I could add a logo or something like that. So you can really build it up to be whatever you want. So that's a really sort of, I suppose, a deeper dive into how to create a more graphically looking overlay. And I suppose the last thing I really want to cover, which is quite useful, again, on the triggers. So for instance, we've got this video over here, and that just plays for a minute. So for instance, what if we wanted to go from our, let's say we're on a panel session, and then we want to bring in a promo video for a new product. And then after that, we want it to automatically bring back in our speaker panel on screen. So if we come to our sample video, click the cog again, we go into triggers, and then here's where on completion works. So what we want to do is on completion of that video finishing is we want the panel session to fade back in. So if we press on completion, and then once that's finished, we want that to fade in. And then also we want to fade back in our input number 3, which is our overlay, which we just created. And then also you can set the duration of the fade. So for instance, it could be a quick fade, or it could be a long fade, depending on how it best looks graphically. And then again, you can delay that. So if I press add, now what we've done on our sample video, on completion of that video finishing, we're going to bring in our panel session back. So if we fade that in, and vMix can restart your video and play it automatically. Again, the auto follow is quite useful because it will bring the video audio back in. So if we just skip to the end, all being well, when this finishes, it should fade our panel session back in. So that's really useful to create some more automation. And then what we could do is add, for instance, to get a bit more fancy, is if we go on transition in, we overlay one in, and then if we do our title, so if we now added that, so let's say for instance we're going to play this product video, and then when that's finished, that'll then fade my panel session back in, and then it also brings in the title overlay rather. So that's a real overview of how to become a bit more, I suppose, create a more graphically nice looking stream that's a bit more, I suppose, complex in the way that it works with some graphics. You know, we've put some automation in there, but you can see it's really easy once you've worked out how things, you know, work together, you know, what shortcuts do what, and, you know, you can really start to create some really, you know, TV looking streams, whether it be for a church worship for your congregation that's now at home, or we're doing it as a product launch or an award show with a DJ, and then we're going to do some awards with a celebrity on screen and stuff like that. So it's really good for anyone, vMix, I think, and it's good, like I say, in the way that you can build it up modular, and it's really custom in the way that you can do things.
No, I think absolutely. This has been fantastic. This has been, I really appreciate all you've done, Nick, and I think for everybody that's watching this is what Nick is kind of hitting on is that, and to Nick's point, you know, talking about the comparison between using some other tools out there, is that this is really kind of giving you some broadcast quality features to be able to take something and go to the next level up. So previous videos I've talked about different stages where you're at, and as Nick correctly pointed out, right, we need to build a good discipline and go with the basics, work through the process. As you spend more time with the tool and you become a master of this tool in your production, then you can start implementing some of the features that Nick is kind of discussing here in terms of automation and adding lower thirds or titles. And, you know, there's a lot of capability within vMix that we've covered just today. And we're probably just scratching some of the surfaces of the tool. So we love to hear your feedback. We would like to hear what your thoughts are. If you are using vMix, share your comments. If you're not using vMix, what are some of your takeaways from this session today? Give us maybe 1 or 2 or 3 items that would be helpful for you. And we could go from there and respond, follow up. We'll provide some information here. So Nick, thank you so much. I know it's later your time in the UK in London, and I super appreciate between part 1 and part 2. I would even love to have Nick back just to talk about some other areas of this tool, because I think he's done a fantastic job. So kudos to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been really good, but it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to next year and working on some more projects, and things are really getting excited. I don't think the streaming's going anywhere. I think it's just gonna change and sort of move as the industry moves on, and I look forward to working with my clients and, you know, on some really exciting projects.
Absolutely. I think, and you hit some features that, you know, as we go into 2021 and we look at where we're going ahead, is absolutely to your point, streaming is not going away. It's going to continue on in this new norm of sorts that we're all in globally, and we're transitioning to how do we handle and manage these activities and support our clients, our internal customers, or even our congregations, as we mentioned, at a church. So, you know, there's a lot of areas that we're going to be covering. I'm looking forward to 2021 as well. And you mentioned NDI and some of the technologies as we look to innovate, improve, make it more efficient, how we support from a production as well as how we use these tools. So everybody, again, share your feedback and comments with us. Stay safe, stay well. A happy new year to you if you're watching this in, well, it's going to be 2021 probably when you see this, but we wish you a happy new year. And Nick and I wish you all the best. Share your feedback. Talk to you soon.